Well, I just spent some time upstairs reviewing my videos of when I was disassembling this thing and making sure I understand exactly how everything goes back together, so I feel pretty confident about that. So the first thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bearing that goes on here back on, but even before that, I'm going to clean this because it's pretty dirty. Alright, so this is going to be the first bearing that I put on, the biggest one. That goes onto the back of the sheave here, and I'm going to use this big piece of stock, so I'm going to be putting all my force on this inner ring. And that simply goes on until it's flush, which should correspond to it also hitting this shoulder if I'm not mistaken. That's it. You can tell by the feel that is now bottomed out. Doesn't freewheel as much as the old one does, but that's partly because it's actually pretty cold right now and the grease in there is really packed in there. That'll work itself in. As it warms up, that grease will become more fluid and it'll work fine. You know, I'm not going to throw this one out. This is actually still pretty good sounding bearing. Smooth feeling too. But I'm going to put the new one in because I've got it. Alright, so next, this sheave has to go down this way onto this assembly here. And there's a key right there that has to engage that groove. And then there's going to be a snap ring that will go down and into this groove and hold that on. The only thing, I can't remember right at this moment whether or not there was another snap ring underneath this to set the maximum depth that this went down to. In other words, I'm not sure right now whether or not. See, there's a groove here, but that groove is too wide for. You can see that groove is too wide for a snap ring. It's actually got some debris in it too. It's another good indication that there was nothing in it. So I don't know if that, does this go all the way down and actually cover that? I better check and make sure there wasn't some other thing in my bag of tricks here. Big huge snap ring. There were 3 snap rings for this shaft. 1, 2, 3. And no spacers or anything. Alright, so I'm ready to install this. Now I did clean this up on the wire wheel because there was some junk on there. And I didn't clean this bore out yet. Let me clean that out real quick. Alright, just use a small wire brush. Clean that up nicely. So now, this goes bearing side facing down onto here. Even though I clean those up, it's still going to be a press fit. Gonna have to press it. Well, I could just stick this on the press on top of a flat plate, and if I had a sleeve that was the right ID to slide over this, but only bear on this flat section here without putting any pressure on this slanted part of this sheave, I could press it on that way. But since I don't have a sleeve that'll really do that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack this differently if I put this so it's supported this way and then press on this, I can push this down. And now it occurs to me I can actually use the hole in my bench. Maybe I can just tap that down with a dead blow mallet. I want some light directly on this so I can see. So I've got to get that keyway to go in there. Looks like I'm fairly lined up. That's pretty close. It was going pretty good and then it just stopped dead, so I'm going to have to put that in the press. Well, I couldn't ask for a better fit than the hole I've got right here when I put my plates here. That way I know I'm not pushing on the angled part of the sheave here. Now I just need the thing I don't like about doing it this way is I can't see when I've reached where I need to get to, because I'm not sure how big the gap was here. What I'll do is I'll take a quick peek. Alright, that groove's still not showing, so I must go down and pretty much almost bottom out on that thing. Oh, something's ready. This one's getting interesting. That's it, just about touching the bearing. And the groove is... groove's exposed, but I don't think I'm there yet. Let me see if let me try the snap ring and see if it fits in the groove. Yep, so that bearing sits right on top of this sector gear here, because I just need a hair more for that snap ring to fit in there, and that's about what I got left is a hair more to give. So just gonna bottom that out. That's it right there. Alright, so now I've got to install the snap ring. Come on. Ow! Sure that's fully seated in the groove. I think it is. Yep. All right. should that be lubricated with? I guess it can't be oil, because oil would sling out. Oil would sling out and get on these sheaves. So I'm thinking it should have grease on them. There's two plastic keyways in there, or keys, to go in these keyways. One is yellow, one is white. I wonder if there is a significance to which way they go. Look identical. I'm also thinking maybe this bearing that goes on here should be put on before I put this on there. Only because if I have to press this on, it's going to be this one. This bearing has to get pressed into here and onto here. If I press this onto here first, then I'm going to have a real hard time pressing this on here. Because if I press it into here first, then I can press on that inner race to get that down in there. Still going to be tricky. Guess I should clean this rust off of this while I have this out. I think it's supposed to all be nice and shiny like that. Oh, my battery's dying. This is such a light press fit. I could just tap it in. I'm wondering if some of that stuff that Hi everybody, it's 7:30 the next morning. The morning of Super Bowl Sunday 2015 to be exact. And I've got a fully charged battery and a nice cup of coffee and I'm back to work. And I'm hoping I'm going to get the mill running today. And I'm pretty excited about hearing how it's going to sound with the new bearings. Last night after the battery died, I did go a little further because I wanted to get some stuff done. So I ended up finishing installing the bearing into this sheave, and then I installed, then I cleaned both surfaces really well because I figured that was going to be my last chance to really get a good access to both of these surfaces to make sure that there wasn't any grease or oil that had gotten onto them. And my hands are clean this morning so far, so in case you were wondering. And then I addressed the issue of what to lube this with. I used high temperature bearing grease because that happened to be what I had. I had several grease choices, but I thought maybe the high temp grease might be less likely to, if this were to become hot for some reason in there, flow out, for lack of a better explanation as to why I use that grease. And I put a very light coating on the bronze oil light type bushings. There's two of them that this rides on. They're about that tall, one on the top and one on the bottom. I put a very light coat on those because there was evidence of some sort of a black substance that looked like it was some type of a grease that, you know, over the years had hardened. And also I put a very light coat on the two plastic keys that ride in these keyways right here. So now this moves up and down nice and easily and smoothly. And this was a little bit sticking a little bit before, and I can imagine that this could also give me a problem with the the operation of the variable speed, because the principle of the variable speed, from what I gather, you've got a spring-loaded sheave pulley up on that motor. So you can see that's got a big spring-loaded sheave on there, and that basically wants to stay in the closed position under spring tension. But then, interestingly enough, there's no spring on this sheave, and furthermore, the way this is adjusted, this is, you know, the speed adjustment lever goes on top of this, and so this sits down on here and turns like this, and what happens is there's a little roller bearing right here that I put some grease on, and I grease this little track that it rides on right here. So it's important that I get this in the right location. It's got to ride here, not here. If you look at this, you'll see this is flat going all the way across. This is the side that it's high here and it goes down like a ramp. So what happens is when this is on there and I turn this, if it's in the right position, what's going to happen is that roller bearing will ride on that groove. Keep in mind though, this whole thing sits in the machine like this. So essentially what happens is, when the machine's at rest, it doesn't matter what position this is in, that's not going to be moving up. It's, you know, if this was in there upside down, then gravity would allow this to sit there and be riding on that. So from what I gather, when the machine's running and this is spinning through centrifugal force, this must want to try and ride up. This must want to try and do this. And what must happen is, if this is in the position so that this part of the ramp here is touching that bearing, this can't open up at all. It can't come up. And then as this is rotated, that allows this to come up if it wants to. Well, if it's up here and I rotate this, the ramp is going to push that bearing and force this down. But when I rotate it back to the other position, this is going to come back up on its own basically. So that's why I think if this was sticking, that could cause a problem with the action of this speed drive. So I'll be interested to see whether or not that responds any more smoothly, because I was noticing some weird things going on with that, especially when I had it on the three-phase, the rotary three-phase converter. But I just attributed that to the converter being undersized. But it did seem to do a couple of times. It did a couple little weird things with the new converter. And this is the point I'll mention. If you guys haven't seen his videos, of course, well, I've mentioned Mr. Pete in the past. Everybody knows, you know, everybody who likes these kind of videos knows Mr. Pete. And if you don't, check out his videos. He's got a whole, I guess he's a retired high school machine shop teacher. But anyways, he's a very knowledgeable older gentleman who has a lot of knowledge about machining. And he was playing around with a Tico, I believe it was a Tico drive that he had picked up for his drill press. And he had talked about how after everything was said and done, he actually was kind of a little disappointed, and he probably, if he had it to do over again, wouldn't have done it. And he explained, you know, some of the reasons why. But I believe he was using an FM50, which is not a sensorless vector drive, and I talked about that in one of my earlier videos, where I kind of try my best to explain what sensorless vector does for you and why it's important in the VFD world. So anyways, there's another gentleman. His name is, he goes by Train Man. Train Man is also a experienced machinist, and well, tradesman, why don't we say, because like Mr. Pete, he's not just an experienced machinist. He knows how to do castings, and
you know, he knows a lot of stuff. And his bag is that he builds model railroads, and I don't mean like, you know, the kind you put on your tabletop and you run around. I'm talking about, I forgot what they call that kind of scale, but you know, those little locomotives that they're large enough that a grown man could sit on it and look like he's riding a toy. And I mean, it's a serious hobby. You got to have some moolah to get into that hobby, I think. But it's pretty cool. The attention to detail that the gentlemen who are involved in that hobby, the attention to detail that the extent that they go to achieve such a high attention to detail to mimic original locomotives in that smaller scale. Hats off to those guys, because I mean that's just well, hell, that's an art form. That's what that is. All right. Oh, so anyways, what did I talk about Train Man? I was watching one of Train Man's videos the other day, and he was complaining several times. There was a shop tour of his shop, which is kind of cool. But he was alluding to the fact that he runs a rotary phase converter on several pieces of equipment in his shop, and he was alluding to the fact that he's got one Bridgeport over there, and he's running a VFD on it. And he kept saying 2 or 3 times during the video about how disgusted he was with that VFD on that machine, because he said that thing will drop 50, 60 RPM on him just for no reason, or just do it. So I couldn't help but wonder what model he was using on his mill, because again, I'm thinking that maybe part of those problems have to do with VFDs that aren't that are either A, not sensorless vector, B, not set up correctly, because he admitted that he hadn't really monkeyed with a lot of the parameters that are in there, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to get into that down the road when I'm working with my VFD, fine-tuning it. Or C, combination of both, or I guess D, maybe he's even got a defective VFD, I don't know. But anyways, let's get back to this morning. So what I got left to do, really, all I've got left to do is to finish putting this together, and then I can install it into the mill. Now, talking about that, you guys remember when I took this out, those of you who watched my videos when I was disassembling this goes on here like this, and then this whole big casting right here, goes on like this. And this actually isn't a press fit. This just slides. There's a place for the nut to go. This just slides on here like this. Okay. And then the handle goes on and screws on through these 4 screw holes right here. This is pretty heavy. And when you add this to that and that, this whole assembly gets really heavy. And then when you're trying to put this in, this cover's in your way and you can't see what you're doing. So it was obvious to me now upon reassembly that I shouldn't have disassembled this the way I did. It would have been much easier to have taken the handle off and then taken this off and then worked on getting this out. So for reassembly, I'm going to do this differently than the way I disassembled it. For reassembly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on here. This bearing is a press fit onto here. And then I'm going to just take this whole assembly, put this into the machine, then put the big cover on. Alright? So the next step I've got to do is I've got to get this on here. Now remember, this is going to go on a certain way because we want that bearing right there, that little bearing, we want that to run on this track. So I've got to make sure that's not on the back side of this tang right here, because then it'll be trapped in no man's land here, and what will happen is First of all, I don't think, yeah, the lever won't rotate anywhere near as much as it's supposed to. The lever won't move the way it's supposed to. And the lever will have absolutely no action. Won't do anything. So, since I got the bearing here, I got the ramp there. This is going to go in like this. And now I got to get this pressed down onto there, and then the last snap ring goes on, and then we're ready to put this puppy back in the machine.